Welcome, everyone. I call the September 21st, 2021 Bothell Regular City Council meeting to order. I invite you to recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me. Please unmute your microphones and turn off your video while we display the banner. I'll give everyone a moment to do that. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. Proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings is still in effect. Therefore, this meeting will be held entirely remotely. Public comment will be allowed both in writing or verbally. Sign-up sheets were provided by the city clerk's office via a link in the agenda. The video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. For our phone-in callers during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so everyone can follow along. At this point, we'll take a moment to take roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Here.
Councilmember Thompson.
Here.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Here.
Councilmember McNeil.
Here.
Mayor Olson.
Here.
Councilmember Dorr.
Here.
Councilmember Agnew is absent and excused this evening.
Thank you. So before we get started, I'll just reiterate some of our meeting guidelines. Speak clearly and pause frequently. And remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. All right, first up on the meeting agenda is meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, move on to public engagement opportunities. So we have a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Open House, September 22nd, 5:30 p.m. Hear updates and provide input on the DEI work. Join our consultant and staff to discuss several new public engagement opportunities. Register for Zoom link and learn more about it at www.bothellwa.gov/diversity. We have a proclamation tonight for the Northshore Schools Foundation.
Mayor Olson, I'm not showing that our representative from the Northshore Schools Foundation is in attendance. So I do now show a different representative. I'm going to bring them in.
Great, thank you.
And this is Carmen. Carmen, I'm going to mess up her name, I'm sure, but Carmen Dalziel. So she should be in. Once you read it, she can say a few words.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Hello. It's just Carmen. I don't really need the last name. It's nice to see you all, council members. Thank you so much for your service. Councilmember McAuliffe, I had to change my background because I was actually at your house in my background a second ago. Mayor Olson, I look forward to seeing you in our live meeting on Thursday. How fun is that when you get to address the chamber? So we appreciate it. The foundation is working hard.
Hey, Carmen.
Yeah.
Let me read the proclamation and then I'll turn it back over to you and then we'll let you rip from there. All right, so we have the Northshore Schools Foundation All In for Kids Month. Whereas the North Shore Schools Foundation exists to enhance and inspire learning, remove barriers, and build life skills for the more than 23,000 students in the North Shore School District. And whereas the North Shore Schools Foundation provides funding for innovative classroom grants, career days, life skills training, student recognitions at the chamber level, accessible classroom seating, and a variety of literature support, as well as community programs such as Backpack for Kids, Opportunity Scholarship Funds, and Basic Needs Aid and homeless services. And whereas the foundation has granted over 2.9 million to schools in the North Shore School District, providing resources that benefit the students and the more than 3,000 teachers in all 42 schools and special programs every day. And whereas the North Shore Schools Foundation is funded solely through private contributions made annually from supporters, including students, alumni, parents, teachers, staff, local and regional businesses, residents, and community members. And whereas, as a member of the National Schools Foundation Association, the North Shore Schools Foundation has been voted the best of North Shore and plays a key role in the district's recognition as one of the top school districts in the nation. Now, therefore, I, Liam Olson, do hereby proclaim the month of October to be North Shore Schools Foundation All In for Kids Month in the city of Bothell, and invite the celebration of this organization as it continues its mission of bettering lives in our community. And now, Carmen, back to you.
I wanted to say thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Councilmember Davina, as you know, is one of the first board members when I started 11 years ago. The work we've done in the community has grown. We appreciate the city of Bothell's investment through us to help homeless students. Our students in North Shore have the best support from private sources than anyone that my homeless director tells me about. So we're excited. I appreciate your partnership. Please know that we are indeed a partner. If there's anything that we can do to support the work that you do, we are right here. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Carmen. And I will see you Thursday morning at our hybrid chamber meeting. All right, on to council committee reports. Does anyone have a report they would like to share with us? Deputy Mayor Zorns.
LTAC met today. Let me grab my notes. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Because we're funded, LTAC is funded by lodging tax dollars. It's been taking a hit during COVID. In 2020, our ending balance was $482,000. 2021, it's looking like $369,000. 2022, we're anticipating the ending balance is going to be $226,000, and 2023 is they're projecting $163,000 based on what's been the impact of COVID. Street Sense is one of the few services that we get that gives us a guaranteed return on our investment, which is fabulous. And the one thing that when we start talking about ARPA that might consider is the grants that LTAC provides. It not only supports tourism, but its economic impact improves Bothell's image and promotes our existing attractions. And the grants also help bolster city revenues. So when we start thinking about ARPA needs, this is one of them. And then the other thing is the holiday lights are going to go up at the end of or around Thanksgiving, and will stay up through January. And I'm already anticipating enjoying those bright lights when winter sets in. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, let's move on to visitor comment.
Thank you, Mayor Olson. We received one written comment that was forwarded to the City Council. This morning, and that was from Sarah Gustafson, and she wrote with questions regarding the budget. Those questions will be made part of the record. And we have one person scheduled to speak live, and that is Andrew Nelson. He is here, so he will have 3 minutes which to speak. Andrew, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Great. Yep, 3 minutes. I'm going to start
Excellent.
your timer.
Thank you. Yes, hello, city councilors and staff. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk about Lot D today. I saw on the Bothell Facebook page that there's a sort of a model of it. And this is kind of a Debbie Downer thing, but I'll be the first to tell you this isn't really what the community wanted. I do believe that the decision to make this Lot D into an apartment building was a financial one. I remember 2 years ago, excuse me, at a candidate forum, a question was asked about Lot D, what people would want on it, and candidates back then, they said other things, right? And I believe they're genuine. I think that, the candidates back then who are now councilors, they're genuine people, and they generally wanted what they said. But it's apparent to me that you were persuaded one way or another to make it into an apartment building or sell it to a developer. I understand we need places for people to live. I hope these apartments are going to be affordable. One of my least favorite statistics, it's favorite or least favorite, but it's I'd say least favorite, is nationwide 52% of people aged 18 to 29 still live at home. I'd like to see Bothell data, but I know that takes time and money, and maybe that's not the best use of the time or funds, but I'd still like to see it eventually. If we, for whatever reason, decide to do another apartment building on our other lots, let's just make sure it has public space and amenities. Better yet, I'd like to see for our other lots, community-oriented things. Maybe a business center is a potential option. I haven't looked at the other lots of zoning, but I'm assuming retail is part of it, like Lot D was. Small businesses make a big part of our economy, and they have bring people to the city. So regardless, from here on out, I expect the remaining lots to be community focused. I'll say whenever I call in, I always try to be fair. When you do something well, DEI, fireworks ban, the pride flag, I let you know, and I absolutely appreciated those policies. But when I believe you made a mistake, I'll call and let you know too. And I do believe that this design choice in particular was a mistake. On a side note, a little bit unrelated, I've been talking to neighbors around Bothell, and they've been complaining about parking downtown. I don't see it as an issue, but I think that we need to advertise City Hall as a parking garage a bit more. It seems to be rarely used. We paid a lot of money for the City Hall. It's great. It's a beautiful building, but we need to make sure it's used, the garage is used efficiently. And also it's used as a cooling center during heat waves or other, elemental disasters. So anyways, I appreciate your time and your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all I show on the list, Mayor Olson. There are no other members of the public in the attendee room. So that's all we have for public comment this evening.
Thank you. On to consent agenda. Nothing was pulled, so I will look for a motion. Councilmember Dewar.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Dewar to approve the consent agenda as presented with a second by Deputy Mayor Zorns. Any discussion? Not seeing any. City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Zorns,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember McAuliffe,
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil,
Yes.
Mayor Olson,
Yes.
Councilmember Dewar.
Yes.
Passes 6-0 with Councilmember Agnew absent and excused.
Thank you. On to AB 21-137, consideration of an ordinance updating the business licensing program. And I believe we will have our finance director, Chris Bothell, with us. We'll give him a moment to walk down the hallway.
Good evening. I'm going to share a presentation. All right. So this is the business licensing program update. You may recall this item first came to you in February of 2020. A lot changed shortly thereafter, and this was kind of put on the shelf as a result of some of those events, but it's time to dust it back off because we have a deadline coming up. So just a refresher on our business licensing program. Our program was established back in 1960. There's been a number of changes to the program since then. The last major update to the program, or major change, was back in the year 2000. So we haven't seen any major changes in quite a while. Our current business license fee structure has 3 factors. Each one of these factors has a fee associated with it. The first is business classification, the second is business square footage, and the third is employee count. And the program generates about $1 million of revenue every year. So back in 2017, the state legislature enacted a law that was aimed at improving the business climate in Washington, making it easier for businesses to transact business. And one of the provisions of that law was a requirement that all cities move to a web-based business licensing system by the year 2022. So that is the deadline that we're kind of coming up to. The challenge that we have in Bothell is that the web-based systems can't accommodate 2 aspects of our current licensing program, and those are the renewal timing and the fee structure that we have with those 3 elements. So we're required to make a couple of changes in order to move to the state's business licensing system. So I'm going to walk you through those. The first one is an update to the renewal timing. So currently all of our Bothell business licenses expire on June 30th. So we process all 3,600 renewals right in the middle of the year. The state system requires that we process renewals on the anniversary date of the business with the state. So they're processing renewals throughout the year, and they're requiring us to go to that as well. We don't have really an option here. If we want to go to their system, we have to comply with this. And so we need a code change to do that. The state will prorate the first year fee. So there won't be any overlapping periods where the fees are overlapping for businesses when we implement this change. The second required update is much more complicated. It's a change to our fee calculation method. I mentioned a minute ago that we have a 3-factor, that our fees are based on 3 factors, and each one of those has a fee associated with it. The state system will only accommodate a single factor. And within that, there are only 3 options that they offer us when we move to their system. The first one is for a flat fee. And a flat fee is really popular with B&O tax cities. It charges all businesses the same fee effectively. So your smallest business and your largest business are going to pay the same business licensing fee. It really doesn't work very well with business licensing structures that are revenue generating like Bothell has and a number of other Puget Sound cities have. The other 2 options that we have are both based on employee count, and they're very, very similar. The first one is literally employee count. So a business reports the number of employees that it has on the renewal date, and there's a per employee fee associated with that. And the result is the business license fee. The other one is employee count in ranges, and this is one of our factors. And so the ranges for us currently are 0 to 2, 3 to 10, 11 to 25, and so on. And there's a fee associated with each one of those ranges. So it's a little less precise than the employee count, but it's really, really very similar. So we are proposing that we move our licensing fee structure to employee count and ranges, simply because it's familiar to our businesses, and also it works well with a revenue generating business license. But there's kind of a complicating factor, and that is with the rate setting. So this slide just illustrates the issue that we have. Currently, our 3 factors, each one of those factors generates revenue that contributes to our business licensing revenue. So if we abandon 2 of our factors, so business classification and business square footage, we're going to miss out on 2/3 of the revenue that we need to support services provided by the general fund. And so we are proposing to increase the rate, the per employee or the employee ranges, the rates associated with those to make up for that revenue loss when we move to the state. And so we've got 3 rate setting scenarios, and we're not asking for action on setting the rates tonight. Our proposal is to bring back a rate that satisfies the needs of the budget with the mid-biennial budget package. So we're going to use this as one of our tools to balance that budget when we bring that package back to you in November. And we'll disclose what the business impacts of that the proposed rate is at that time. But I wanted to give you a heads up about what these scenarios kind of look like and what the business impacts are. So the first rate scenario that we're presenting tonight is the status quo rate. And the status quo rate would generate approximately the same business license fee revenue that we currently get. The next one is the budgeted rate, and the 2022 budget assumes that we're going to increase our business license fee revenue by increasing our some of the factors associated with our business license fees. And so we're calling that the budgeted rate. And then the third rate that I'm going to present is the comparable rate. And the comparable rate is the average rate that are in effect with similarly situated cities, which are non-B&O tax cities with revenue generating business licenses in Puget Sound. And those three cities are Kirkland, Redmond, and Linwood. So this is the business impact analysis for the status quo rate. So this is the lowest rate, and this is the one that would generate the amount of revenue that we're kind of accustomed to historically. There's just, and I realize it's kind of hard to see the numbers on here, so I'm going to just go ahead and tell you about the things I think are most important here. So in the row that says employee count at the top there, you'll see it says like 0 to 2, 3 to 10, 11 to 25. Those are the ranges. And right below that, those numbers like 2,236, that's the number of businesses that are currently reporting in that employee rate, that range for their business license currently. And so the reason I point this out is just to highlight the fact that most of our businesses, or a vast majority of our businesses, are reporting 10 or less employees. The number is 88% of our businesses are reporting 10 or less employees. So we're heavily weighted to kind of the smaller businesses in Bothell. And for the business impact, what I want to highlight is the percent increase or change in their business licensing fee that would be kind of the average based on this reporting, past reporting, and the rates associated with, for this one, the status quo rate. So what this chart tells you is that for businesses reporting 0 to 2 employees, they would see, with the status quo rate, they would see an average reduction of 77% of their annual licensing fees. The businesses in the middle, so reporting between 3 and 75 employees, would see an average of a decrease of 13% to an increase of 13%. And then our largest businesses reporting 76 or more employees would see an average increase of about 30%. So again, that's the status quo rate. The budgeted rate, again, this is the one that's assumed in the 2022 budget. So for our very smallest businesses, the 0 to 2, the percent increase is approximately 11% on average. The businesses in the middle, they would see an increase of approximately 74 to 130%. And then our largest businesses would see an increase, an average increase, I should say, of 160%. And then the third scenario, the comparable rates, our smallest businesses would see an average increase of approximately 71%. Businesses in the middle would see an increase of between 170 and 256%. And our largest businesses would see an increase of approximately 273%. And of course, these are all averages based on the reporting in each one of these categories. So we have some next steps with this item. We are asking you to consider adoption of an ordinance updating just the renewal timing tonight. And that will help to get us going down the road of signaling to the Department of Revenue that we'd like to, we're starting to put pieces in place to get on their licensing system. After tonight, we have the adoption of a resolution to update the fee calculation method and setting the rate. And we're proposing to bring this back as part of the mid-biennial budget update package. The third item is outreach to the business community. So in your packet, there's some steps that we would like to take to get the business community comfortable with this change and make sure that they know where to find resources and help them calculate their new license fee and those types of things. And then the fourth item, of course, is go live with the business licensing, with the state's business licensing system. And we expect that to happen in late spring. It needs to happen before our renewal date in the middle of the year. So we're thinking kind of late second quarter is kind of where we're targeting right now. That's the end of the presentation for tonight, but I always enjoy questions.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Bothwell. So the three scenarios have quite a different amount of money or revenue. And your recommendation was for the employee count range, which, if I remember correctly from the slideshow, would reap the largest revenue increase. We don't need that revenue increase in order to meet our budget this biennium, do we?
So thank you for the question. The calculation method is kind of separate from the rate setting exercise. So the three scenarios for rate, I believe what you're referring to is the comparable rate. And currently we don't need that to balance the budget. I hope that answered your question. Let me know if it didn't.
No, it answers the question, but am I right that is there a recommended action from staff? I thought it was that range one. And so I'm just trying to understand why staff is choosing to recommend that particular one. If we don't need it for budget, and knowing that we're kind of, in kind of an unknown economic territory right now.
Yeah, I apologize. I probably wasn't very clear. What we're asking for council action on tonight, we would like you to consider taking action on changing the renewal date, just to move it from our current renewal date of right in the middle of the year to be kind of the renewals that will happen throughout the year, which will allow us to go to the state system. On the changing the method and the proposal for the rate, we're proposing to bring that back to you with the mid-biennial budget package, just based strictly on the needs of the budget package that we're going to put together. And of course, we expect discussion at that time as well, and in the interim as well, while we work through the budget.
Okay, so you're just giving us kind of an overview to think about for later, but right now you just need renewal date decisions.
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I get bogged down by all the details and sometimes miss the lead. I'm happy supporting a change in the renewal date. So I appreciate the presentation and thank you.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
I don't want to spend our bandwidth on asking questions of something that we're going to be discussing further down the road. I just want to say thank you because we already talked about these different levels of how we would do the business licensing. It really is very much appreciated that we have a preview, both us and the public at large have a preview of this, so we can kind of ruminate and think about it when it's time to discuss. So thank you very much.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just I'm looking forward to the response from the business community, because I see that you are going to outreach to them. And so I'm looking forward to hearing their reaction as well.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Bothwell, for providing the information that we need tonight. I had a question on how we look at when we talk about 0 to 2, 3 to 10, 11 to 25, do we take a look at the makeup of those businesses, like what types of businesses those are, and maybe who would be running those businesses? Or do we just look at it holistically across the board and say, here's the employee counts, and do we take into account who may be working for those businesses?
That is a great question. We actually don't get a lot of data on beyond kind of what I just described. We kind of have to back into the based on the fee that they pay. That's all we're able to store in our current licensing system. And so we kind of have to even back into what reporting category, what range that is, and that kind of thing. So unfortunately, we don't store a lot of data on the businesses. One thing that we will get with the state system is more information about demographics of our businesses and like NAICS codes and all kinds of other stuff that we don't currently have access to. So I apologize. It's probably a really unsatisfying response, but we just don't have a lot of data on our businesses.
No, I mean, it's just great to understand that we don't have that data. And hopefully we can find ways to engage and understand what those demographics are and what the makeup of those businesses are. And I'm not saying it's going to happen in this cycle, but as we kind of move forward to making sure that we're being inclusive across our community, one of the things that would help is to kind of understand how this has an effect on certain types of businesses, right? And you might have, members of this business community, when you engage with them, maybe can help so that we understand what that is. Because, a 0 to 2 employee with a 71% increase could have a negative effect. And that could be a business that actually is helping in an arena of people of color and things like that. So I just think that understanding that as we go through the process, I think would be good to be able to understand. So thank you.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Director Bothell, for the presentation. A couple questions. We can switch back and forth between the different types if we look at different revenue sources down the road, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. What would be some of the benefits to, let's say we did a flat fee licensing program with a B&O tax that raised exactly the same amount of revenue? Do you know roughly like how that revenue would change how revenue came from us, or from what types of businesses revenue came from us?
It's a great question. It sort of goes back to Councilmember McNeil's comment. We don't have a ton of data to work with currently. We have done some analysis to figure out how much, what the gross receipts. So if we went to a B&O tax, it would be based on gross receipts, and how much our business community, what the value of those gross receipts are that are generated in Bothell, just to try and ballpark how much we would generate from a B&O tax. Beyond that, we just don't have enough data to really be able to answer that question. I do think that when we get on the state system, we are going to have better reporting, and we're going to get a better idea very soon as we start to move to that system, what kind of data we'll have access to. And I think there's a good chance that we'll be able to respond to some of those questions when we start to make those connections with the data.
Okay. And between the current amount and the comparables, it looks like the current amount is about a third. Does that mean that our business community is paying roughly a third of the amount of taxes or licensing fees as they would in comparable cities?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Director Bothell, for the presentation. Definitely makes sense to line up our fee schedule or the renewal timing with the state. So I think that will simplify that for us. And then that was a good preview of some of the discussion for the mid-biennial budget update. So appreciate that. Councilmember Dewar.
I'd like to move the recommended action.
Councilmember Thompson.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion by Councilmember Dewar to adopt the ordinance to update the business license renewal timing for preparation for subsequent action that will change the business license fee structure and set a corresponding rate for the new structure, with the second by Councilmember Thompson. Any discussion? Seeing none, City Clerk.
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Zorns,
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Councilmember McAuliffe,
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil,
Yes.
Mayor Olson,
Yes.
Councilmember Dewar.
Yes.
Passes 6-0 with Councilmember Agnew absent and excused.
Thank you, Director Bothell. All right, on to AB 21-138, Town Square, Festival Street, and other downtown improvements. And I will turn it over to our interim Assistant City Manager, Becky Range.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Allow me to share my screen. All right, are you seeing the slides there?
Yes.
Well, Mayor, council members, thank you so much for having me tonight. I am very excited to talk about a very positive topic tonight. We'll be having a discussion about our amazing downtown, and we will be talking about if there's better ways that we can use and activate and enjoy our public spaces. For anyone who might be watching tonight who's not aware, we've been having a lot of discussions about a temporary closure of our Main Street. We closed that temporarily in June of 2020 to support our businesses. And during that time, we found that our community and our public love gathering downtown. They love walking around. They love being in that pedestrian area. They love meeting up with neighbors. They love taking family members down there and visiting. And that's become very clear to us that that's a wonderful space. As we've stepped through the discussions about the closures, staff has expressed some concerns with a permanent closure, and staff strongly supports and recommends intermittent and seasonal closures. But as we want to respond to City Council on their requests, we're having lots of dialogue about a permanent closure and what that might look like. Several months ago, Council did direct us to come back with more information about the rest of downtown and other potential public spaces and gathering opportunities, including the town square and Festival Street. So I will say the good news about tonight is we're not making any decisions here. All we really want to do is have a good discussion about the direction of our downtown and about our placemaking. And then hopefully some of that information that you learn will help you as you have mid-biennial budget deliberations later on. And also some of the information might help inform any decisions about 2022 capital facilities plans. So a real low pressure presentation. We just want to educate you and hear from you. So as we've had many discussions about the Main Street closure and some of our activity downtown, staff really got together and said, we really want to understand exactly what it is we're looking for. We really want to know, what is it about this? We've talked a lot about this one block in Main Street, and what is it? And we've heard lots of things. We've heard, as I mentioned earlier, it's wonderful for people to gather and socialize in this pedestrian-friendly area. We've heard from you that it's about community building. We like Bothell residents to have a place to go. We have also heard from some of you that we like having visitors and shoppers come and enjoy our downtown and spend money in our businesses. We've heard from many of you, and also this became pretty clear in a DEI community survey that we had, that our community wants activation of downtown. They want events and fun programming and multicultural programming in our public spaces. We also have heard some of you really want to make downtown really a cool place to be, and I think we all agree with that. Many also want to continue supporting the businesses during the health restrictions and maybe beyond. And we also heard that even though we talked a lot about the Main Street closure, there's also a desire to have balanced support for all downtown businesses. And as we think about all those different things that we're looking for, if that's our objective, we really tried to brainstorm and say, how do we deliver some of these things? And in many ways, we wonder if we're not thinking big enough. Bothell, are we thinking kind of small? We have an amazing downtown, and I can tell you, people from other cities, they look at our downtown and they're jealous of it. They think it's wonderful. We have so many new businesses. We have so many new restaurants. We have so many public amenities, and people want to come to our downtown. We kind of went back to our original downtown plan, and we thought, what was the vision for this downtown? And we just reminded ourselves, this downtown was designed and planned to be a network of public spaces, including walkable corridors and a sequence of unfolding spaces that inspire people to walk and linger in the heart and the center of our city. Some other language from the plan. The plan was to foster development of an engaging and diverse network of connected public spaces. So that's some fun, flowery language. But we want to admit maybe we move in a different direction. Maybe the downtown plan was done a long time ago. Maybe we do shift gears and move in a different direction. But what I will offer to you is that if we do want to think about our downtown as being the best it can be and to be vibrant and programmed in an active space, we really thoughtfully decided that there's kind of two things for this strategic approach from staff. And the first thing that we all want to kind of maybe eventually get consensus on is that we have to prioritize this community programming and events. And it's like we all know that we want it. We all talk about it, but we really need to all agree that we need to put the resources in place and the vision in place to actually make those things happen. And the biggest part of that right now is restoring our parks and recreation funding. And that is something that council, you'll be discussing in later meetings. And then the second thing is just to really think bigger about our flexible and connected spaces throughout downtown and what those might look like. And we'll talk more about, it's not just Main Street. Main Street's a wonderful area, but those flexible and connected spaces include the town square around City Hall and Festival Street on 101st and our multi-way boulevards. But first, to talk a little bit about that restored parks funding, we know that our community craves this engaging multicultural programming. The DEI team has met, and we like having dreams and visions about events that can be held downtown where we learn about each other. We have different arts and crafts vendors. We have learning opportunities where we learn about different religious faiths or cultural traditions. That's something that the entire community is really excited about. And actually in the Main Street closure proposal that we received, they also described this programming of our downtown as a gathering area for music, arts, farmers markets, and children's activities. We also have had some very exciting discussions lately about a recurring Friday night community event series. And that is really exciting some people to think about. Perhaps in the summer, every Friday night, there's a particular place where everyone from Bothell is going to be. And maybe we thoughtfully and deliberately close down streets to make that happen. So that's pretty exciting. But I will say that to deliver any of those types of things, it really takes all of us, not just city staff, but our community partners, our nonprofits. And it takes a lot of relationship building and partnering with local leaders. And part of that is if we have more parks funding, we can dedicate staff to that effort and help move some of those things along and help be better supporters. So when we think about those flexible and connected spaces, we've talked a lot about what really is an accessible public town square. What does that really mean? Is it feasible to connect different public amenities and public spaces all throughout our downtown? We want to think big. Are we inviting and attracting shoppers and different types of people to our community that they might not come for one event, but if it was a different type of event or something a little more, to their liking, would they come? And that really means we should think about a wide array of programming and a balanced approach. And when we thought about our downtown, it was actually designed and constructed with this in mind. Now, the resolution's not great on this photo, but I want to show this so that we can think about more of our downtown that can be activated and more of our downtown that can come to life. So just to orient you, of course, the green is the Main Street block that we currently have closed. But if you look up to the top in these blue blocks, this is what we think about when we think of our town square and our Festival Street on 101st there in between 185th and 183rd. And then the yellow all along the east and west side of Bothell Way, those are the multi-way boulevards that were specifically designed for a purpose that we'll talk about in a minute. And then of course on the south side, we have our park at Bothell Landing. So the Town Square and Festival Street, it was designed, our City Hall plazas were actually put there to provide space for community events. We also have extra space at the police department lot, and there's also a parking lot on the south side of 183rd that has been used for large events in the past. And when we think about what's already at the Town Square, there's already things there. There's the fountain, there's public art seating, there's game tables and festival lighting. There's electricity along both sides of 101st. So when you think about programming events there, it is kind of already set up for that. What we do recognize is, there's no stores or retails or restaurants right around there. So it could be a program space. It could be a good space for food trucks to come in. But organically, a lot of folks don't just want to come and walk around, City Hall. We kind of recognize that. I do want to just remind you that we've already had a lot of events there. And I even see this picture gives me a little bit of anxiety. This is pre-COVID, but if you're looking north on 101st, Festival Street, this would be looking north. City Hall is off to the left. This was the UW block party. What an amazing event. Another photo, I believe that's the same event in that parking lot. And I want to mention, we actually have a very exciting Bothell Makers Market, and it will be Saturday from 10 to 6 p.m. And I just want to mention this because a very special Bothell resident actually has planned this entire event and is bringing in 50 different vendors. It's a curated event, food trucks, and Ms. Frost, one of our community members who has planned this, has done a phenomenal job. And they actually will be having this event at the Town Square. They'll be having it at the plaza, and we hope everyone can come out. We think it's going to be pretty amazing. So when we think about the Town Square and Festival Street, there are things that are already in place. If we wanted to program events there, what would we need to do? We'd need to find a better way to quickly and easily close Festival Street. And we will talk more about bollards. There's some other options to easily close both Festival Street and Main Street if we needed to. That'll be, those are included in an ARPA presentation later. But there also could be some sidewalk improvements. For the most part, it's pretty good around there. Maybe some improved street and sidewalk lighting for nighttime events, maybe sunshades. But for the most part, we could program that area pretty easily. Another area that we've not activated and not really used in our city are the multi-way boulevards. So again, it's those access lanes that are along Bothell Way on both the east and west side. They are already separated, and would be very easy to close those streets. Power bollards have already been installed along many of the areas, so it makes event planning a little bit easier for the vendors. There's some great pedestrian scale lighting that's already there. It was kind of designed to be used for gathering opportunities downtown. So really, nothing has to be done. We just have to find a way to program and host events there. So again, that's what they look like. So I have to tell you, I don't always look at places when I drive by or I walk by, but I got to admit, I do go to the ranch driving quite a bit. And so I would like to just say, the next time you're there in that area, take a look over at these lanes and just take a look at them. And if you can imagine, if we wanted to do a farmer's market there, close that off, it really lends itself to it. And I liked what Andrew said earlier. We do have a City Hall parking garage. And especially if you did events on this east side, people could park in the City Hall parking garage and come there. So, right now we kind of have empty, well, sometimes there's cars on them driving and some of them have parking spaces, but they're just kind of empty and not being used right now. But think about it, we could eventually have farmers markets there. And the other thing I want to say about this area where the multi-way boulevards are, we have some amazing, super awesome restaurants and stores in this area now. Just you walk or drive in this area, you see so many amazing places. They're new, exciting. Other communities are talking about our businesses and spaces. And we think that if we really want to think about all of downtown and supporting more of our businesses, this kind of west side, if we could do some programming there, we think that would support them. Last but not least, as we talk about the streets, Main Street is already an amazing place for community gathering and events. It is the heartbeat, right, of many of our community marquee events. And it's wonderful because when you walk around Main Street, you're able to access the shops and the restaurants and a lot of pedestrian amenities that were already designed with the Main Street Enhancement Project. What else could be done to improve Main Street? We are having a lot of discussions about how would be the best way to safely and in a flexible way close and open this street. We are talking about the potential of installing bollards on the east and west ends to help facilitate that. The bollards won't immediately resolve the emergency access issues, and that's some things we're still kind of working out. But even if Main Street were to be closed permanently, we still think that we need to think about how we do that with bollards. Now, I want to talk lastly about the park at Bothell Landing. The other things we talked about, they're a little bit more immediate. We could restore some parks funding, do some programming. We could maybe even install some bollards and move forward on some of those items. A much bigger conversation and a larger conversation is the park at Bothell Landing. It is a huge part of our downtown, and it's such an important area of our downtown. It's a beautiful natural setting, connects to the river. We have so many amenities. You have the amphitheater, you could get to the water, museums, just the connection to the trail, so many things. There were 10 zones identified for development in the master plan, and that's a big thing. It's very expensive. So we just want to note that perhaps in CFP discussions or in future budget discussions, we'll talk more about what are we going to do with the park at Bothell Landing. That was a long time ago that we did the plan. So maybe we take a fresh look at it and start to think about how do we activate or do improvements to that park that will also help us with this overall downtown activation plan. Because people really will come to the park at Bothell Landing and come over and utilize our downtown and spend money in our restaurants and shops and enjoy our downtown. And I do want to remind you, there have been some phenomenal events at the park at Bothell Landing. We've had multicultural events there. It's a little bit bigger of a space, and so you can have different unique things that are happening, maybe a bigger event footprint, and a more exciting stage if you have a little bit more space. So I know that was a lot of information, and I just wanted to present it to you to have a little bit of discussion about our placemaking in downtown and maybe what we could do or the direction in which we could go. Some next steps for us. Staff is really being diligent about answering some very specific questions about the Main Street closure. And we believe that in early 2022, we'd like to really start to hone in on the logistics issues of what you might want to do with that Main Street. Really answer the grant fund impact questions for you, really start to talk. If we really are going to think about closing it permanently, we really need to think about the real estate appraisals of the public right-of-way. And then we do need to do some engagement with our transit partners and our property owners and present to you a little bit more details on that. But we do think a next step for the mid-biennial budget adjustments and ARPA funds, if you will think about restoring the parks funding and prioritizing community events. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about removable bollards. And with that, I will open it up to questions. And I would also like to note that Nick Stroop, our Parks and Recreation Director, and Michael Cotterman, our Community Development Director, are also here, and they can also answer any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Becky. There's so much about this presentation that I absolutely love. I love that staff's really thinking big picture, instead of kind of siloing Main Street and other discussions, but actually having a broader discussion about some of the council's things on our wish list. I think if I remember correctly, during council conversations, every single council member was interested in the Friday night market concept. And I love that we're now thinking about how to make that best happen. I think what the pandemic has taught us is that we need each other and we miss each other. And we need our community to be whole again. So sorry to get emotional, but I'm really excited to think about the possibilities. I'm really love that you've asked or requested that we think about restoring parks funding. Nothing would make me happier. And the removable ballers, I think, would solve a lot of a lot of challenges that maybe closing down some of the streets would give us, but also would give us that flexibility to really make and take over streets as public space. And I love the idea of kind of linking, maybe having a daisy chain of public spaces that are all interconnected somehow. What I would love is at one point we had I think it was a student project. I'm trying to remember, but of a pedestrian bridge that brought Bothell Landing into downtown. I mean, if I had $1 million, as the Bare Naked Ladies song goes, that would be my wish. But without the $100 million, I just I love the idea of really bringing it all together and having a really big plan. I think there are things that we could do to link spaces visually. Right now we're really, the crown jewel of our parks is Bothell Landing, and it's the terminus of the main thoroughfare in Bothell, which is 527. And there's nothing marking it right now except that lovely sign for a day or a lifetime. But I would love to think about if there's a low-cost way to kind of mark that with maybe a water feature or something that we know that members of our community would love to have. I think the water feature is one of the things that there was a lot of excitement around when we talked about the master plan for that space. And I know that we can't afford to do everything that was in that master plan, but boy, it would be really great if we had kind of a vision of ways to invest in our community that we know would reap really big rewards. And I think the Friday night market is one of those things for so many reasons. I think not just providing community, but also providing a venue for us to get to know members of our community, for us to celebrate different backgrounds of members of our community, and bring together. I think it's the kind of project that could really inform all of our boards and commissions that we could all get behind and rally around. I could see a role for arts in those Friday night markets. I could see, obviously, there's a role for parks in those Friday night markets. And I think rather than everyone being in our silos, what a way to really build our Bothell staff community and boards and commissions community, other than getting together behind this really worthy, exciting project and really a gift to the community for surviving the pandemic. And maybe I'm thinking too big, but I just think it would be so fabulous. I can envision music in the park and food trucks, and maybe we have themes of, Southeast Asian with music and food and dancing and art. With the Arts Commission could help with that, and maybe even little booths that kids could try different types of art projects that are relevant to the whatever culture we're highlighting that week. And it would be an economic driver as well. So I don't really have any questions per se right now. I just want to say how very grateful I am that staff has thought about it in a really big picture way. And I'm really excited to continue conversations about it. So thank you so much.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Thank you, Mayor. I am grateful as well. As you were presenting, Becky, I was just, I was like, am I having a mental spa day? It was just so encouraging to think about ways that we could gather as a community. And there were a couple of things. I will say I'm still waiting for the Ministry of Silly Walks because I think that would be fun. Maybe I should just do it in my driveway and just entertain myself. But I actually do have a question. First I wanted to make a comment is that maybe we should count our blessings and say that since we're looking at it from a bird's eye view, I suspect, I don't want to be, gloom and doom, but I suspect COVID's going to be here for a very, very long time, and we will be constantly chasing it. So finding ways, we're learning how to be healthy with COVID, but finding ways that we can learn a new normal where we just naturally circulate when clusters of people, instead of all running to one common spot, we just naturally as a people learn to kind of circulate and move around and enjoy being community, but not so tightly packed. And I'm just counting this as a blessing that we're looking at ways that people can circulate and still be community. So my question, parks, positions that there's so much that we need to give parks. I don't even know where to start. But as far as manpower, people power, parks, how many positions are we short in parks right now to get back to pre-pandemic?
Yeah, Nick, I think I'll let you answer that if you'd like. I do know we are going to address that in some budget discussions, but Nick, did you want to speak on that just a little bit?
Absolutely. So during the tough budget discussions that we had before, we actually reduced our staff by 3 seasonals, as well as a recreation assistant and a recreation coordinator. Kind of key to this conversation is that recreation coordinator and that recreation assistant, because both of those positions were the positions that help plan community events. So things like Trick or Treat Main Street, the 4th of July, music in the park. They did, our classes, they did the fundraising, they did the communication side of the house. So really those positions in particular are going to be key for activating these community spaces, because as we all know, these events, they're awesome, but they take a ton of work and they take a lot of heavy lifting. So, to create the capacity there, what we're going to do is, or at least what we're going to propose to do is maybe not focus on the classes that we had pre-COVID. We can bring that back for a discussion in the 23-24 biennial budget, but to take that capacity and put it towards event planning, the community side, the Friday night market, the Friday night community event series. That's where we think that we'll gain the capacity with those 2 positions. Does that answer your question?
It does. We can't forecast. We're making our best educated guesses on what the future is going to hold economically for us. And I have to say, every time I see our parks group, how many people have we got? 10 people?
We have 10 in operations.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who are operating. It's a Herculean, and they are doing a fantastic job. So I guess my first priority is to get those seasonal workers and get some relief there. And I would love to get the recreational assistant, coordinator, event programmer position back. I'm just hoping in our discussion that we have in the near future, we can look at a way to make sure that their position is solid and they don't have to be worried about whether or not it's a nail biting. Are we going to keep them around? That we showed them that we have the ability to keep them and allow them to be invested in Bothell. So thank you for answering those questions.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think it's critical that we restore the park and recreation funding. I would like us all to revisit the pros plan that has just about a year or 2 old, and it was a big, quite good survey of the community and what they wanted. And I'm really excited about restoring our recreational positions, event planning. We need to really think strongly again about what we'd like to see happen downtown in all of these different spaces. Multicultural festivals is really critical to our diversity and equity. We need to do something for our youth. Whether it's a skateboard park or a water feature, someplace for our teenagers. Forever and ever and a day, we've always heard our teenagers say, there's nothing to do in Bothell. Right, Nick? You have the teenagers. And then we did have a skateboard park, and it was well appreciated and enjoyed. If you look at Redmond, Kenmore, they have some awfully good events for you young people and for the teenagers particularly. So bring back the music, bring back the festivals. You know, we are really excited. People in Bothell love to dance in the street.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor. Watching, seeing the pictures of like past events that we have had, like made me really miss them. Like I have really enjoyed myself just heading down there and seeing people that I know and listening to music and just enjoying and just being part of a community. This presentation in particular has me really excited for what the future holds. And I kind of have a rule that I don't say after COVID, because when is that going to be? But as soon as we can, I'm really looking forward to doing more of this. I love the holistic look at downtown, at all of the different areas that we can do things in and all of the different opportunities that we have. And I like that staff is thinking big picture, and I really enjoy just kind of looking and taking stock of really all the opportunities that we have. I just want to make sure that as we have these conversations, that doesn't take away from a specific focus on making sure that we have one place at least where we know we can do things. Like, because if we have a really simple, easy way to do things, it makes our special event permit process a whole lot easier. Folks can come in and do events without having to worry about parking studies and do we have a fire truck to block the road and things like that. So I'm excited about making it easier, not just for us to do events inside of Bothell, but for the events that the community puts on, like to make that easier and hopefully get more of those too. The verbiage in our downtown plan that talks about an interconnected set of pedestrian experiences. That's not going to be a shock to anybody here that I like that. And one of the needs cited was sidewalk improvements along 101st in between the Festival Street block and Main Street. One of the pictures of that event was a chamber event that section of the street was closed for. And I don't know what, the definition of Festival Street is. And obviously there's a lot more infrastructure. There's a lot more, when you mentioned the plugins, the outlets, things like that. But as we go through this, I would love to talk about both of those blocks. Because if we look at that interconnected thing, we don't need to fix sidewalks if we consider both of those blocks, both of them to be Festival Street. It gives us a lot more room. It connects it to Main Street to the rest of downtown without having that, whatever the opposite of interconnected is. So I would like to just bring that up and see if we, as we go through this process and kind of look at this, let's give ourselves more space. If we're temporarily closing something, that half block in an evening, it's a higher and better use to have people there enjoying themselves if you already have a whole bunch of people coming in to enjoy themselves, I think. Love the idea of doing something at Bothell Landing. And we all know that the budget does not exist to do the master plan that was done years ago that was aspirational. But man, it'd be fun to just make it look finished, even if it wasn't, a carnival. Let's make it look like we did it on purpose, whatever that looks like. And I've got I've got a couple kids. My 4 and 6-year-old would love a splash pad, a place to go to. I mean, there's things we can do that I don't know if we can afford, but I would love to have that be an area that looks done on purpose. I'd also love to have a fence along the highway. You know, it's a lot more comfortable place to be with young kids if there's a barrier in between the park and the highway. See, I'm really happy that staff is recommending restoring funding to parks, because parks got hit so hard last year. And Nick, thank you for hanging in there for the last year and a half. I hope that like we're nearing the end of your long time in the wilderness. But you know, this overall discussion to me really is providing both the space and the ability for us to do the kind of things that helps our community really kind of come back together. And after we've all spent a couple of years in our upstairs bedrooms, like I'm really excited about the opportunity to just see people and do the kind of things that make it really fun to live here. And I just couldn't be happier about the discussion we're having. I'm looking at my list that I wrote down. And I believe I've reached the end of it. So thank you for hearing me out.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. Not much more can be said, but I guess, Becky, you kicked off this presentation with excitement and what we had to look forward to as you went through it. And I'm energized. I think I am awoke now with all the opportunity that we potentially have within our community. I must also thank those before us that thought about this master plan. Even though the master plan hasn't come to fruition yet, 100%, we have the spaces, the opportunities, right, to create these spaces. And so it's up to us to continue that, to find opportunities. Love the idea of downtown spaces for teenagers and to get them down there and skate parks, splash parks, whatever it might be. Just spaces to create that sense of community, what we have been trying to do for so long. I can't say enough about restoring parks funding. It's something that obviously everybody knows is near and dear to me. I take that space away from our community, and not having the ability to maintain those spaces means that we cannot get out and be active. And I can't thank the community enough in our region enough for creating that space at the former Wayne Golf Course, and the Parks Department at Bothell for all they've done to keep that space looking the way it has throughout this pandemic, because hundreds of people visit that park on a weekly basis, if not thousands of people. And it is just amazing to see them, kids at all ages, just down there with their families and enjoying. So anything and everything that we can do to restore those parks, to get kids out and active, and help them with their social mental needs by just being out and around their friends in the outdoor environments is huge. Park at Bothell Landing. I mean, I would just love to see more festival events down at that park. Music in the park, I think, would be cool. Cultural events. I can't stress enough. If we want to be an inclusive, inviting community, we need to create the spaces for that. And the market along I can't say enough about that idea, that vision. That is so cool. I mean, I just, when you showed the screenshot, the slide of the yellow, the different colors of the different programming within our community, I'm like, wow. I mean, I just, honestly, that's what I thought Bothell was already doing. But to know that we have not, but have the opportunity to do it, I get goosebumps. I mean, I don't talk like this a lot, how energized and engaged I am, but I am so proud of this council for the conversation that we're having on this. And I'm excited. I think Councilmember Thompson said it, he's excited. I'm excited because of this conversation and the comments from this council. And the positive comments, and it means a lot to me. So I just wanted to say thank you for this. We need something like this to keep us moving in a positive direction. So I'm super excited.
Becky, thank you very much for the presentation. I think other council members have said it, how I appreciate the bigger picture over the overview you gave us of all the facilities that we have and how it meets that interconnectivity. You can go from Park at Bothell Landing up to Main Street, up to the Festival Street, over to the Multi-Way Boulevard, and reminding us what infrastructure we already have created as part of these projects already. So I think, a key step that needs to happen is just start using it, reminding people that it's there, what the possibilities are. A couple programs, a couple events, people like, oh, that's what you can do in that space. That's awesome. And then it just leads to more, and it becomes more of the norm instead of those outlier events. So thank you. It was a great presentation. You really got all of us jazzed up. So look forward to having many more conversations on this. And I too will say, let's bring back Nick's people and get him and his staff busy working on getting the community back together next year.
Thank you, Mayor.
So it was just informational tonight. So I think you got a lot of positive feedback and a lot of information. So thank you.
Super helpful. Thank you very much.
Great. Let's keep it going and move on to AB 21-139. We'll have a presentation on the 2021-2022 mid-biennial budget update, revenue forecast update, and budget proposal for surplus properties and the American Rescue Plan proceeds. And once again, we have our Finance Director, Chris Bothell, with us.
Thank you. I'm going to share a presentation. Okay, so this is the kickoff for the mid-biennial budget update. I want to start by acknowledging that this is a really unusual mid-biennial budget update. Under normal circumstances, the mid-biennial process is really just a checkup on the budget to see how actual results are coming in compared to the forecast and the predictions that we made during budget development. But this one's unusual. There's a lot more moving parts and there's a lot of interplay between the various parts. So I just made a list of kind of the topics that we're going to tackle with this mid-biennial budget update. And when I refer to the budget package through this process, this is kind of what I'm talking about is all these various pieces coming together in something that we're going to bring back to the council that hopefully meets the needs and the desires of the council. And we'll obviously want you to consider adopting that later in this process. So this budget package is going to deal with these topics. We've got the revenue and expenditure updates. Those are the routine aspects of a mid-biennial update. But we also have a spending plan for the property sale proceeds. So I mentioned during the previous, that we've sold 2 properties, Lot A and Block D. And so we've got some money sitting there that's unbudgeted, and we need to create a spending plan for that. We also need to create a spending plan for the American Rescue Plan distribution. We've received the first half of that distribution. And so we're going to try and get some of that, get a spending plan put together for that as part of the mid-buy process. We also have 2 revenue enhancements that are assumed in the 2022 budget. There's an increase in the business license fee revenue that's assumed, and also a councilmanic increase in utility taxes. So we need to deal with those in some capacity during this process as well. And then we have the council directed changes. Under normal circumstances, we don't open up the budget at the midpoint to think about the things that we might want to do that weren't funded in the first go around or during budget development. But this is such an unusual process. We want to do that. And so we've got a budget workshop teed up for the city council to share with us what you'd like to see in the package. And certainly we're interested in entertaining some additions. So tonight, the agenda for tonight is the revenue forecast update. So I'm going to present that in just a minute. And then we've got kind of the kickoff to the budget workshop. We have a presentation of a proposal for the property sale proceeds. And then we have an analyst who will be joining us for the American Rescue Plan distribution proposal. And there'll be a lead in there to kind of reacquaint us with what's in the American Rescue Plan and some of the kind of strings that are attached and those kinds of things. And the idea with this budget workshop is really that we're putting proposals out there to solicit your feedback. So we're trying to generate feedback with these proposals. And so we're looking forward to hearing what you'd like to see in the final proposal. On October 12th, I'll be presenting the expenditure housekeeping items. There's some operational items and some capital items. And the balance of that evening will be devoted to the City Council budget request study session. And so this is that opportunity for you all to share your feedback on the proposals that we put out there and also tell us about the things that you'd like to see in that final package. And then we tentatively have scheduled November 9th for the presentation of the mid-biennial budget package. And we'll, of course, deal with the public hearings at that time as well. So I'm going to jump into the revenue forecast. I'm going to start with the general fund. The messaging here is going to be really similar to what you've been hearing during the quarterly reports. The news is overwhelmingly positive. The first adjustment we have in the general fund is a nearly $5 million positive adjustment for sales tax. And that's primarily a result of really strong development activity and a continuation of the trend that we saw during the pandemic or early in the pandemic of folks doing more shopping from home, resulting in less sales tax leakage to other cities. We do expect that both those trends are going to continue through the end of the biennium, and that's this adjustment as a result of that forecast. The next item I have for you is development services revenue. Our community development department is forecasting to have a record year in 2021 and then a new record year in 2022. And so that's resulting in a positive adjustment of $5.8 million. And then the final adjustment's the one that we've been talking about a lot, and that's the property sale proceeds. The Lot A and Block D, the value of the proceeds from those sales is about $13.2 million. There's a couple of adjustments outside of the general fund as well. We have that American Rescue Plan distribution. This is the first half of the approximately $13 million that we're expecting to receive. The next half we're expecting to get next year. We don't have a spending plan for that, and so we will be working on that during the mid-biennial budget process. And the final adjustment is to the Capital Improvement Fund. We have a positive adjustment to Real Estate Excise Tax 1 and Real Estate Excise Tax 2 of $3 million each. And that's primarily the result of a very strong real estate market. Despite low inventory values continue to increase, and we've seen a lot of individually significant property transactions in the first half of the biennium. So that's a very positive adjustment to the forecast as well. That is kind of the end of the revenue update piece. The news is overwhelmingly positive. There are a number of revenues, obviously, that are not presented here. And that's just because they're coming in really close to forecast or they're performing kind of as we expected. So are there any questions on that before I move on to the property sale proceeds proposal?
I'm not seeing anyone raising their card.
Okay, so I'll move on. The property sale proceeds proposal, there's a theme to this, and it's funding unmet financial needs. And just as a reminder, we're soliciting your feedback. So we did put a proposal together, but the final package will be based on kind of the feedback that we get during this presentation, plus what we hear from you later in the budget process. So despite the fact that the city's financial condition has improved over the last couple of years, there are still a number of unmet needs around the city. The unmet financial needs that we're attempting to satisfy with the proposal that I'm going to show you in a minute is imminent but unfunded asset replacements. There were some difficult budgets in the past that one of the things that was done to help balance the budget was to underfund or in some cases not fund at all some asset replacements. Some of those replacements are coming due, and so we need to think about a way to fund those. A couple of years ago, there was an analysis done of what the unfunded need was, and it was about $14 million. So we have resumed in this biennium the full annual set aside for future replacements, but we still have this gap that we have to deal with. And so we're proposing to put some money towards that unfunded need. The next one is the cleanup of surplus properties. So these are the downtown properties that need some environmental cleanup. Near the end of this biennium, we're scheduled to run out of our matching funds to continue that cleanup and get those properties ready for sale. So the proposal includes some money to get us through that. There is an unfunded project in the adopted capital facilities plan to demolish several buildings in our parks and open space. Again, that's unfunded, and so this proposal seeks to fund that. We're proposing to set aside some reserves and opportunity funds with this money. And then the final item is to fund a line of credit for the fire stations. You may recall that when the fire station budget was increased, a line of credit from the general fund to the project was established to be paid back with fire impact fees. And at the time, I noted the impact that funding that line of credit might have on the general fund's cash balance and some of the ramifications associated with that. And so we're seeking to fund that line of credit with the property sale proceeds to mitigate the impacts on the general fund. And so this chart shows you the proposal. And again, we're putting this out there for feedback and discussion. So the first item has $5 million in the proposal for the environmental cleanup of the downtown properties. The staff working on this project believes that's hopefully going to be enough to get us through and get all the remaining properties cleaned up and prepared for sale. But there's a tremendous amount of unknowns in that work. The next item is turf replacement and lighting at the North Creek Fields for $1.5 million. This is one of those big ticket asset replacements that's unfunded. And so we're proposing to fund that with these proceeds. And then the final item under capital is the unfunded project to demolish those buildings in the parks and open space for $500,000. Under reserves and opportunity funds, the proposal has $2 million for a city council strategic opportunity fund. And so what this would be a fund that we would establish to set aside some money for future opportunities that would be identified by the council, that there may not be funding available for otherwise. And there is a note that we would like to also have a little carve out for a contingency fund for the cleanup. There's a lot of unknowns in that work. And so if we could tap this funding source, if we needed it, that would be really helpful. And so we would, of course, like to have a little carve out on that if this were to get traction. The idea there is that if the properties are being prepared for sale, we would presumably be able to replenish anything that we took out of this fund with the property sale proceeds. We're also proposing $2 million for a budget stabilization fund, which would help us to weather future economic events and provide a little cushion to maybe address some difficult budgets in the future. And then the final item is that 10-year line of credit for fire impact to be repaid with fire impact fees that'll help fund the additional budget for the fire station rebuild project. So that is kind of our proposal. I know it's a lot to kind of put on you, but if you have any initial feedback, we'd love to hear that. Also, there's another couple more touches with the budget where you're going to have where you should have plenty of opportunities to share any feedback about how you'd like to see this money used. If there's any questions or feedback, I'm happy to take that now or at the end. But otherwise, if there isn't, I'm going to hand it over to our management analyst that's helping us navigate the American Rescue Plan, Aurora Belli.
Lots of cards this time, Chris. So let's go with Councilmember Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor. I've had less fun discussions since I've been on council than what to do with all this money. That has not been a normal experience for me. So this is new. So if I'm uncomfortable, I'm sorry. I love that you came to us with some priorities and some examples. I really feel like with all of these different windfall funds that we have that are one-time monies coming in, I kind of feel like it deserves a study session on its own. I feel like we should figure out what we want our framework to be for spending these money before we identify projects. And rather than it be, here's what we don't know how to pay for, I think we should do a lot of what our DEI consultant was talking about. A framework of who in the community benefits from these things, who in the community is in need of help, what are we trying to accomplish with this big picture, and then work on a list of priorities from there. So I don't know what the process is for that, but Mayor, if you'd be willing to have a study session about this, I'd sure appreciate it, because I think we should understand what we're trying to accomplish before we decide what we do. Oh yeah, and I just wanted to give a call out to staff. I appreciate that we called out engaging with the DEI consultant about the ARPA funds. I don't see why we should treat this money differently. I'd like to have that same process for all of the money that comes in and all of the things that we're doing. There was something else I was going to say, but I didn't write it down. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Thank you for prioritizing this. This is one-time money coming in, and there are some one-time big expenditures that we have been waiting that are desperate to address. So I appreciate you prioritizing it. I have a hypothetical question. So say, for example, the environmental cleanup only comes in at 4.5 million, and there's a $500,000 we didn't have to spend. How do we process that? Do we plug it into another category? What happens with that? If, this is the optimist speaking, if we come under what we project to budget, what happens with that money? Where do we go and earmark it so it doesn't get absorbed and we never see it again? Because we want to use it for these one-time big expenditures that have been put on hold, right? So what happens with that money, hypothetically?
So just from an accounting standpoint, it would end up in fund balance, which would not be a recurring resource. So it would kind of maintain the flavor of being a one-time resource for us. Council can impose restrictions on any money that they like. And so if you wanted to do something like that as part of the package to tie the money up with some council restrictions, you can release those restrictions with council action later if you choose. Or you can write those things as broadly as you'd like. If nothing's done, though, it would just end up sitting in fund balance, and then it would be a one-time resource that could be allocated in any future budget.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll let council chew on what what priority they would like on how we keep track of that. But thank you for answering the question.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Bothell. I had a few things that I wanted to comment on. I think it was it last week? Anyway, I can't remember, but it came up that Human Services, or maybe it was in the packet. One of the options was to use ARPA money for Human Services. And I understand it's because we only allocated for 2021 in the budget for Human Services grants. However, I think there's a real danger in using ARPA money for Human Services grants because it kind of says that this is not something that we're dedicated to funding ongoing. And so my comment on that is that it should be a budget item. It should be a budget item every year and not something that we use special money to pay for, so that it's not just an expected ongoing expense. One of the things that I would like to look into, and I think this probably also goes along with our DEI priority, and that is making sure that we're taking care of the least of us. And that includes possibly paying off utilities that are payments that are behind schedule. And so I'd like to have information as far as what are we looking at for Bothell utilities that remain unpaid, and what are we potentially looking at for utilities within Bothell that are unpaid. I would be really interested to know, because I think if people are helped out in that scenario, then when they do have money, they'll be spending it in our town. I'd also like to know ongoing what our plan is for the general fund reserve. We've heard for years that it needs to be a certain amount of money, but that hasn't been part of this discussion so far. So I'd like to know what's our goal as far as the general fund reserve, and making sure that we have the appropriate amount in there, because it may seem like money is raining down on us right now, but we know these things come in cycles, and there will soon be a time when we don't have money. One of the things, the other things that I think we should potentially look at as we've sold the last two pieces of land, I think we felt a lot of pressure to get the maximum amount of money for Lot D. And in doing so, what we did was we let go of control of what that looks like. And it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to create a gateway to our fair city. And I think we missed the boat because we were more concerned about how much money we could make than what the long-term ongoing impact of such a structure would be on the face of our downtown. And I will forever be sad that we were within grasp of having something really monumental and we didn't. And I would hope that this money would buy us a little time to do appropriately and right with lots E, F, and G and the other remaining lots in the city, because this won't come again. And fool me once, I don't want to make that same mistake again. So in buying time to do a proper RFP process where we actually know what we're getting and what that building will look like. I also am interested in where we can, as far as priority. I really can't agree more with Council Member Thompson, because I understand staff's reflex to fill holes in the budget. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but I also think we need a big picture. I want something to show for this money and this windfall that's not going to disappear in the next budget. I want, whether it's connecting spaces in downtown Bothell, whether it's closing off Festival Street and Main Street and creating something, I want to create something with this money. I don't want us to just fill holes. And I know there are plenty that we can fill, but I also want to make sure that there's something to show for it. And hopefully we're investing this money and using it to make us more money in the future, whether that's doing things that provide economic development or, long-lasting civic gifts that are in our community for, a generation. I think those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. And then lastly, I wanted to ask about the turf fields. Are those turf fields going to be replaced with chrome rubber? Is that the proposal?
Aaron might be in a better position to answer that.
Good evening. No, the plan is to explore other both environmental and public health related options better than chrome rubber. So I believe staff is reviewing the options right now, and if funded, then there will be the opportunity to include that in the specifications when we go out for that construction project.
Great. I would just make a plea to my fellow council members. We know that chrome rubber and rubber from tires is, and the runoff that it produces is one of the reasons that our salmon populations are dying off. And also we know there have been studies that female, in particular goalies, soccer goalies, have come down with lung cancer, and they believe it's from chrome rubber. So I don't think any of us wants to take the risk of that happening to the youth in our city. And so I would ask that we all really consider when we do replace it, if we do replace it, that we're replacing it with something a little more safe. I am sure I have more to say, but I think that's plenty for now. Thank you very much.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just going to be a little brief here. My first understanding was, as the properties were to sell, they were also to pay for City Hall payments. So that's something I think that we have to really focus on, is how we are paying off City Hall. While we struggled in the last few years, that was where a lot of our money went to. And so I think we have to bring that forward and decide how we're going to do that. I think it's important to recognize, and I'll go back to the park at Bothell Landing. That is the entrance to our city. And we need to revisit the master plan and also the pros plan. You can build a lot of buildings that will be great entries to the city, but the park at Bothell Landing is the key and is the heart of the city. And it's our entrance. So that's one of my high priorities. Also, I'm looking forward to seeing how we can restore human service dollars. We need to support people who are challenged, not just in utilities, but also in rent, and also businesses that have been challenged through the COVID. So 20 years ago, when we did a downtown revitalization plan, maybe 25 now, we talked about a bridge from Bothell Landing to the city. I really would like to revisit that as well. I think that connecting the landing to the city in a better way than the stoplights and the walkways and all of that would be something we might look into and would be really important. So I think those are my major points, and the rest of it has already been brought up by many other council members, which I appreciate as well. Thank you.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the information update. I had a question. Councilmember McAuliffe brought up the City Hall repayment, and can you just give a brief summary of the property sales and what those funds were supposed to go towards, or what previously they were supposed to go towards?
So unfortunately, I would love to be able to tell you kind of what the discussion was like when the properties were acquired and they were, going down this road of preparing them for sale and stuff. But unfortunately, I wasn't here, and there isn't a lot of record to help us kind of to help me kind of get a little smarter about the topic. So I'm not going to be very useful to you in that capacity. But
Deputy Mayor Dorn.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I might be able to help a little bit with this. I contacted a former council member who was there during the time that they were having the conversation and City Hall was coming together. And I asked her that question. I talked to Trish Sandberg. I said, what were the property sales supposed to be tied into paying off the lease payment? She said no, but the conversation was, as all projects get bigger and maybe our interim manager can recall this because you were there as well, in a different function. But as City Hall got more and more elaborate and more costly as all projects happen, the council discussion was to justify those expenses that were going beyond what they had planned for City Hall was, well, if we do that, we can pay for this and this added cost that we had not anticipated by the property sales. So it is somewhat tied into property sales paying for City Hall, but it was council's intention at the time was to cover the added costs that weren't initially planned when they put City Hall together. Does that help at all, or does that just muddy the water?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I guess maybe in the discussion as we move forward, maybe we can learn more from city staff on what those discussions were, what that looked like. I'm just remembering conversations that I had when I was first elected about that. And I just want to make sure that at least we have an update and kind of understand what the thinking was behind it. Nothing more than just making sure that as we go forward, we're being fiscally responsible in ensuring that things that were done in the past, they're at least looking at them as we move forward. As far as, I think it's on top of everybody's mind. We obviously want to balance a budget. We want to be fiscally responsible. And I think Councilmember Dewar brought up, the reserves, right? What is that number? Where do we want to be? Where do we need to be as a city? Obviously we want to keep our ratings. Obviously we've been through a pandemic, but those are important things to talk about, how those ratings work and understanding where that general fund needs to be to keep us in the best standing. As far as I'm kind of trying to understand a little bit about the spending of these funds. We talk about 6.6 million this year and another 6.6 million to 13 million. Can maybe Aurora can explain to me what these ARPA funds are really supposed to be for?
Well,
Yes.
I'd say maybe
Sorry.
if we can just hold off on the ARPA. And I think right now we're just trying to focus on the property sales right now. And then I think Director Bothell was going to shift it over to there. So if you could I'd say just keep the questions and comments to the property sales and his initial proposal or kind of recommendations, or the framework for the ongoing discussion for the property sales now. And then I think he's teeing it up to go into ARPA right after this.
Okay, so it sounds like they were both kind of brought up simultaneously at the same time. We discussed the sale of the properties. We discussed what the funding would be for the sales of those properties, and then we'll have more of a robust discussion. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just hold the remaining questions that I have, because it all kind of ties together anyway until we talk about the ARPA stuff.
All right, I'll just weigh in real quick on kind of the presentation that Director Bothell just did about the property sales. During our last budget discussion, I know we had some very tough discussions about just the asset replacements. We were already stretching a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the vehicles, a lot of our assets out to a longer useful life than typically we were planning on. So I think we're really stretching that rubber band quite a bit, and there are definitely some that I think are becoming critical, and we want to take those actions before all of a sudden it becomes an emergency replacement, or we lose the use of, one time the synthetic fields don't pass their stress test, and then we're kind of left hanging without those facilities. So I think it's in the best interest of our city to, at least for the asset replacement, take a look at the ones that we've put on hold and stretched out longer than initially planned. And then with the others, continue the discussions there. I think the property cleanups, I think that's a wise place also. That's paying into something that will return dividends as we get those cleaned up and we get those sold off. We get those economic opportunities as well. And then, as Councilmember Dewar was saying, we would, hopefully, if those are sooner than later, we can take the time to go through a process and have a little more control of those properties, and shape it with what the community and the city is really looking for out of those. So I guess that's my 2 cents on this initial piece of it, and I'll let you continue on to the ARPA piece of it.
All right. Well, thank you all for your feedback. It's really valuable for us in putting the proposal together for the final package. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Aurora Bella. She is the management analyst that is going to help us navigate the American Rescue Plan, and she has a presentation for you.
Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can give my presentation. All right, is my screen showing up?
Yes.
Wonderful. So, as I said, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with the City of Bothell and to be here as your management analyst for ARPA. We're going to be covering a variety of things this evening. I'm going to begin with a really brief overview of the American Rescue Plan Act. Next, we're going to talk about a list of projects that we call early wins. And lastly, I'm going to present a timeline of events. So on March 11th, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 into law. We call it ARPA for short. The total amount of funding for ARPA was $1.9 trillion. And of that funding, $350 billion was specifically allocated to state and local governments. The City of Bothell is receiving $13,248,740 in funding. So as I stated, Bothell's receiving just a little over $13 million in funds, and our funding is dispersed by the state of Washington, and we receive it in 2 tranches. As Chris had mentioned earlier, we have already received our first half, which we received in August of this year. And that money is going to be what we will use for any approved early wins projects or any other projects that council decides to fund at this time. The second half we anticipate receiving in August of 2022, and we are not looking to assign any projects to that money until we actually receive it here at the city. All of the money or the expenses must be incurred by December 31st, 2021, and they must be spent by December 31st, 2026. The important thing to note here is that if we don't spend the money, we have to return it. So now that you know how much money we have, the important thing is how are we going to spend it? And we have decided on what we call early wins. And how these originated was before I began at the city, a request was put out to departments to submit proposals for use of ARPA funds. And then when I began at the city approximately a month ago, I went back out to the departments and asked them to review the requests that they had put in and gave them an opportunity to submit additional proposals at that time for the ARPA funding. When all of the requests had come in, management reviewed the proposals, and we scored them based off of these 4 criteria. And basically, we wanted to make sure that anything that we advanced for an early win, that it clearly qualified for ARPA funding based on the current guidance that we have. We also paid close attention to whether executing the project earlier would provide a greater benefit to the community. As was mentioned in some of the council comments, this money that we're receiving for ARPA is one-time revenue. And so we really want to look at tying it to one-time expenditures. And we want to try to resist any project that has significant ongoing costs. And lastly, we wanted to make sure that we weren't creating an enduring policy decision for the city going forward. So with ARPA, there's 7 qualifying expenditure categories where we can spend these funds. We have public health, negative economic impacts, infrastructure, administrative, services to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, and revenue replacement. At this time, not all areas have early win projects, so I will only be covering those areas that have projects in my presentation tonight. The first area that we have a proposal for falls under public health. And as you can see on the slide here, there are multiple ways that we can spend monies and put them under public health. The projects that we have all fall under the capital investments to public facilities that respond to COVID-19. So here's a slide showing just really briefly what the projects are. And these projects will help to facilitate virtual meetings and increase security for the city. Additional information about the specifics of what falls into these categories can be found in your packet. The next area that we have is the negative economic impacts. This is where we can provide assistance to households, unemployed workers, small businesses, nonprofit organizations. It also gives us the ability to rehire public sector staff, such as the maintenance workers that you were referring earlier. It enables us to help with some job training and to help fund projects that benefit tourism, travel, or hospitality. So as you can see here by the lovely dollar amount there. The economic recovery and human services is by far the largest ask that staff has at this time. The proposed projects will help to support economic recovery by attracting events to the downtown area and providing more flexible gathering space options. This is where the bollards come into place that were discussed earlier this evening. We would also like to look at reinstating the human services grants, which were unfunded for 2022. The grants will be partially funded with ARPA funds due to restrictions that are in place with the ARPA funds, but staff would work with City Council during the mid-biennial update to find funding for any grant that did not qualify for use of ARPA. The last category here is we are asking to reinstate positions that were eliminated due to the negative financial impact of COVID-19. Positions advanced for consideration were identified as having an impact on service delivery to the community or for risk management purposes. I'd like to mention that all of the positions that we're looking to reinstate are limited term, which means they do not have a long-term financial impact to the city. Infrastructure. This is kind of a hot topic. Staff has only advanced one early win for infrastructure project, and it is located in the capital facilities plan. We specifically chose to limit funding infrastructure with ARPA at this time. And the reason for that is because there are potentially additional infrastructure bills on the horizon, and we don't want to use ARPA funds if there's a possibility that we could fund a project with additional funding programs down the road. The one program that we have, or project that we have to propose, would be completed in conjunction with the transit work on 185th. And that is designated as T60 in the capital facilities plan. The last area for an early wins qualifies as administrative use, and that is funding a limited term management analyst for ARPA, which is me. And I will go into the specifics of kind of what that is involved as we talk about the next steps, which is where we are now. So the proposed schedule for next steps is fairly aggressive. It includes working with council to approve the early wins package, implementing the early wins package, working with the DEI consultant, and drafting a community outreach plan. Once the community outreach plan has been approved by council, we would need to implement the plan. Then we'd need to come back to council, develop a spending plan. And so as you can see, it's something that is going to be constant touches, talking about the best way that we can use these ARPA funds for the community and to benefit the city as well. We will continue to monitor the emerging needs of the city and the community throughout this process, and we'll adjust our schedule accordingly to make sure that we are spending the monies in the best way that the community and council has requested. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm open for any questions.
Who wants to go first? Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Okay, fine, I will go first, but y'all, we're gonna mix this up a little bit because I see how we just fall into order here. And I end up going first, and then doggone it, there's more questions I want to ask later on because you have such great ideas, but I don't get to hear them first. So, all right. I'll try to abbreviate my my questions because we've got them. Human services, y'all are very invested in it and very concerned about it. There is and I'm going to let the other council members, talk about utility needs and, very important life, just day-to-day healthy life questions. I'm concerned about our special needs population having taken a hit with COVID. One is, I think one of our human service recipients deals with helps disabled kids and maximizing them with therapies and education opportunities to give them the best outcome. So in situations like that with ARPA, can we go and talk to them and say, what about COVID has made this more difficult? And I think Councilmember Doer was saying we need to stay committed to them on a regular basis in some shape or form. But how can we add to giving them some relief? Would we be able to go to them and ask, how has COVID hit you especially hard, and what can we do to help?
Yes, and specifically when it comes to ARPA funds, there has to be some sort of nexus to COVID-19. So in order for us to give grants to those human service organizations, we would need them to be able to articulate how they have had to pivot their services for COVID-19 or the additional services that they had to offer due to the pandemic.
Would we be able to give them some sort of, I don't know, restitution, some restorative help with what COVID has done for the damage it has done in the past to help them get back up to full running speed? Would ARPA funds be able to apply to that?
ARPA only applies to expenses that occurred from, I believe it's March 3rd, 2021, up to December 31st, 2024.
So we can't go back. We can't go back to February 2020. Okay, that's correct. Good to know. So maybe this shoots my next question down. We used to have working in City Hall 2 disabled adults who were a great asset. And they were one of the first 2 positions that we culled and got rid of. Is that kind of thing available with ARPA funds where we could look for places to bring those adults back into being part of our working community and give them positions?
That is something I'd need to look into a little bit further. We do have the ability to rehire public sector staff. I'm not sure if they were staff proper, but we do have the ability to restore the city back up to pre-COVID level staffing.
Okay, even if the impact happened in February, March of 2020, if we're still feeling it, we can address it. And then the other thing is, I know essential workers are part of this discussion. Can we also use this? I'm just asking a rhetorical question because I think you already gave this answer. But when we talk about our first responders, we can look at how COVID has impacted what they've been able to do as frontline workers. We can address ARPA funds for them to help them as they navigate through COVID as well, correct?
Could you be a little more specific with that?
Well, in the past it was PPE, things like that. So we can use funds to help them do their jobs. And who else is frontline? Our parks people?
Yes, PPE is a perfect example. That is definitely covered under ARPA funding.
Okay. All right. Well, whatever I have forgotten, I am going to hope my brain trust that's sitting on my screen will remember to ask. And thank you for answering my questions.
Of course.
Councilmember Doer.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councilmember Zorn, you shouldn't complain about going first because I'm always first. I'm just teasing you. So I apologize. I spoke out of turn about the utility needs because apparently this is the more proper place to have that discussion. So I won't repeat, but just remind you what I had to say about meeting utility needs. I guess what I would say about human services grants, though, is perhaps we don't use ARPA funds for our baseline human services needs, but look at where we might want to supplement what we might normally do. There's probably an eviction moratorium ending soon. I would certainly think that rental assistance or that type of thing would be something that would fall under ARPA. So I'd be interested in that. I was going to ask, though, I think I have the answer now about using ARPA funds for the establishment to help establish and get the community court running. But it sounds like that may be not applicable, though if it were, I would certainly be interested in anything that we could do to help get that program going with the community court. I don't know if there's a nexus, but it seems like there may very well be, especially if there are evictions and that sort of thing going on. Maybe we could apply some of those funds to community court. I'm a little bit concerned about using funds for things that create ongoing expenses. It seems that adding an $8,000 expense every month, maybe it's not that much. But there was another line item with the remote or hybrid workforce, which costs another $28,000 something a month. I don't think I would be in favor of using one-time monies to create ongoing expenses. It's just, to me, it seems like we would be going in the wrong direction. But I am really happy about rehiring staff and doing what we can for economic development on Festival Street. I think that is all of my comments. I do appreciate looking at early wins and having kind of that view on what we can do early and using the money to create those early wins. And I think with that, I'm finished. Thanks.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm very excited about the opportunity that we have been given to support the negative economic impacts on our community. The people in households, small businesses, job training, all of those are keys to our recovery from COVID. So I'm hoping that we could really focus very much on what it takes to really help a struggling community who have lost jobs, who have lost the ability to pay their rent, maybe lost the ability for their utilities. So I really think we need some more information on what that need actually is and how we can address that with these funds. I do think I agree with Councilwoman Durer that our human service grants could be on top of what we currently haven't funded, but need to fund as well, because I think that we have a lot of human service needs because of COVID, and I think we need to identify those and use our dollars wisely for our people. I guess I'm very interested in that it has to have a nexus to COVID-19. And so that's a good question we should ask every time we decide how these dollars are going to be used. So thank you. That's my comments.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you. I have a few things. So when you went out, you were, I believe, said something about soliciting different projects and different ideas for what we could possibly use this for, correct?
That is correct. Departments were asked to submit proposals for using ARPA funds.
Okay, so those all came from staff, right?
That's correct.
Okay. I kind of feel like we could have been involved in that conversation a little bit earlier. You know, these are policy decisions and we're bringing back some early wins. And this is the first we're hearing about like what we want to do. I would have been really interested to see kind of what some of the other ideas were and what some of the other options were. And, I understand that we haven't approved it yet, and that's our job to do one way or the other. But I'd like to know, what are we not doing because of these early wins? Like, what are the other things that were out there? Let me see. We talk about using ARPA funds to rehire folks on a limited term. The folks that we let go when COVID happened were not limited term. I would prefer to use ongoing revenue for ongoing expenses, and I consider those to be ongoing expenses. I would much rather use and based on the presentation that we got from Director Bothell a little earlier, it seems like there should be general fund dollars for that. And I'd like to see the ARPA fund money used, kind of like you mentioned, for that one-time expense rather than the ongoing expense. If it has to be tied to COVID or have some nexus to COVID, I don't understand how the infrastructure work on 185th counts.
So when it comes to specifically giving grants for the nonprofits, for offering assistance to businesses or to individuals, they have to have a direct nexus to COVID. With the ARPA, the president has specifically come out and said that infrastructure is one of the ways that they would like to see this money spent, whether it's water, sewer, wastewater, and then broadband is another really big area that they are looking to currently use federal dollars to pay for.
The 185th, thank you for that clarification. The 185th project, that's going to be the main transit corridor through town, and that's kind of part of ST3 and all the work that we're doing to try to get that done. Are there no other places that we could get funding from this? Is this something that we've tried and failed to get from the state before? Is this was the upgrade to that street? I was under the impression that we were going to be provided dollars to upgrade that roadway due to transit. Was I wrong?
I can help with this one, Aura.
Yeah.
So there are certain aspects of the project, council member, that will be covered by ST3. On 185th, it's fairly limited to the things that they need, like widening some of the intersections, adding some signals. We're still in conversation with them about restoring the road so that it's actually a pavement type that can handle that number of buses. We do have some infrastructure issues as far as the utilities that are sort of pre-existing conditions. And one of the things that we would like to do in concert with that project that wouldn't be a responsibility of Sound Transit would be to replace sewer lines, water lines, that sort of thing. And there is available funding through our utility. We just, there's a nexus not only with ARPA in the aspect of replacing that infrastructure, but it also does, in the long run, it does impact our ratepayers. So we thought that this was a nice opportunity to use some of the ARPA funding to do that project, at least start the design of that project that will not have to be charged to the ratepayers and our connection fees ultimately. So the short answer is yes, there would be other funding available. We just thought this was a nice project to be able to at least start with ARPA funds.
Okay. I guess my feedback to that would be, we're getting these one-time funds, and it would be really nice if at the end of the day, we had something to show for it. If we weren't just plugging holes, and if it wasn't just a grab bag of all the stuff that we wish we could pay for, but we can't. And after the fact, when we're all done, everything's just the same as it was. And there's nothing that we can kind of walk away and show for this, aside from, those things are not bad things, but that project, I struggle spending money on replacing sewer lines with ARPA funds when there are people in our city that are about to get evicted. And it's tough for me to call that an early win when homeless people might be getting created right now. I like what other cities have done, providing direct assistance to residents. I think that should very much be part of the conversation. And that eviction cliff is happening pretty soon. I don't know if that's something that staff brought as one of the options, because I mean, there's no way for me to know. But I kind of feel like I said in the last agenda bill, or a couple agenda bills ago, it would be really nice to have a conversation around this where we talk about big picture. Who do we want to be? And like, what do we want to accomplish with this? And then start choosing projects from there. It's not that I think all of the stuff is bad. Some of the things that are on there, I'm particularly excited about. I would just like to start with the end in mind, who we want to affect, who the most impacted people in our community are, and where the need is the greatest. And I don't know that I see that. So again, if we could have some sort of study session, some sort of just opportunity to talk through as a council, who do we want to be and how do we want to impact our community through this? I think that would be a really valuable time, or a valuable time for us to give some direction and figure this out collectively, because it doesn't feel like we've had that chance, and that's frustrating. I would also just echo Councilmember Dewar. I have heard the terms structural deficit more times in the almost 2 years that I have been on city council than I have ever heard in my entire life. So, using these one-time funds to create more of that is concerning to me. And one question I have, a couple weeks ago, we got a presentation that really was about helping the structure behind our structural deficit. Is that something that ARPA funds could be used on, so we can use these one-time funds to help our ongoing structural deficit?
And let me know if I'm missing the mark here, we are not able to use ARPA funds to fund our reserves. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're asking?
No, we got a presentation a couple of weeks ago from a consultant that kind of essentially does an analysis and goes through our code and tells us, here's what you can do to help your city generate more revenue, over the long term. Is that something that would be eligible for ARPA funds?
Chris, can you speak to this since I wasn't there?
Yeah, so Councilmember Thompson, I think you're talking about the Urban 3 presentation, yeah. Is that right? Yeah, so what we're doing right now is trying to get our arms around kind of with the things that we've been able to analyze so far. So the bill is really, the American Rescue Plan guidance is really complicated and lengthy. And so what we were trying to do is identify areas where we thought that they could clearly qualify and advance those for kind of the early action items. We know that there's a lot of work to do to vet other proposals and other things that we'd like to do in the community, including launching programs, vetting things like whether or not we could fit a larger effort from Urban 3 into it and stuff like that. There's the reason that we're going a little slower on some things where there's risk is because if the things are ultimately disqualified, either in an audit, we get an audit finding because we didn't follow the spirit of what we were supposed to do with ARPA, or we actually get it disqualified by the federal agency and they claw back that money. It just requires a little bit more analysis for us. So just for me to respond to whether or not more work from Urban 3 would qualify for ARPA is going to be really, really difficult because we have, and I'm going to go a little bit further because I agree with you that we would love to show you all the ideas that were generated by staff. But there's some risk associated with those too. And Aurora and I were talking about putting a list together and figuring out if something clearly doesn't qualify, do we present that to council? And what about the ones we really have to vet for you, right? Because we don't want to show you things that aren't going to qualify or there's risk associated with them. And that becomes the thing, that we really want to do. But then we ultimately come back and say, hey, it doesn't work. And so that's why a lot of those things haven't made it in front of you. And Aurora and we've been talking about how to get those things in front of you with the right kind of disclaimers so that if they get traction, but they ultimately won't qualify, what do we do? And kind of navigating some of those more complicated issues. So I appreciate the question. This is the kind of feedback we're looking for, is the kinds of things you'd like for us to research and and that you'd like to see in the package, whether we slow the process down and just say we're not going to do any kind of early action items or whatever. But it feels a little messy, I think. And we kind of expected that a little bit because we wanted to put these proposals out and figure out what is the right process for you on what kinds of things would you like to see. So unfortunately, I can't speak to whether Urban 3 would be able to qualify. It doesn't clearly qualify, like things like the deputy mayor mentioned PPE earlier, or rehiring staff. Those things are specifically called out and there's really no risk associated with them. So we feel comfortable kind of responding in the moment. But some of these other things, I think they're really great ideas and things we should pursue. But we just aren't prepared to really make a definitive statement of whether or not they would qualify. So I apologize, because I know that doesn't solve the problem that's right in front of us. So
it's a real answer though, and that's worth something. I guess I struggle to see a community that has been impacted in myriad ways by COVID-19. I struggle to see how replacing utility pipes is the way that we're going to help our community recover from this. And, you know, the timeline that was brought up earlier had some of these early wins being implemented like this year, like right away. And I'm not quite ready to approve some of those things because I'm not sure that's the highest and best use, because we haven't spent any time talking through this or going through this at all. And it may be the highest and best use of that, but how would we know? So I would, again, I would just love to have more conversation around this. And in terms of, you know, the placemaking downtown, the bollards, that kind of thing, you know, we would, I brought up tonight as an example, you know, looking at the other block of 101st, like where specifically do some of these things go? I think there's just more conversation that needs to be had around a lot of this before we start digging stuff up and spending the money. Oh, and just, again, kind of with a framework that we work through on this, just like we would. And I know that we are going to engage the consultant we've hired in terms of DEI, but I would like to go through all of these and just decide who is getting affected in the community, who is being heard, like what problems are we solving, who is not getting heard, and looking at this in a way where we are really looking to use this fund to help our community either recover from this or have something to look forward to moving from this. So that is my 2 cents.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Aurora, for the presentation. As you went through the presentation, a lot of my stuff was answered that I was going to ask last time, but you know, I keep going back to we're blessed to have an opportunity and to have these funds available to us. But as we balance a budget, and this is my humble opinion, we need to have all the information kind of like in pockets so that we can compile it together and understand. We got funding sources over here from sales of property. If we got the ARPA funding coming in from over here, we've got REIT sales tax, all these different funding sources coming in, and then understand how we can use those funding sources so that we're using them appropriately. And to me, what I think of when I have all these different funding sources is how do I balance my budget based on what needs are in front of me? And decisions that we make up here on our wish list, the things that we'd love to have, if we don't truly understand the long-term effects of not making a correct budget decision, then we could make bad decisions. An example would be if we decide to not use funding for an infrastructure thing that needs to be done now. What is the long-term effect if we don't do that now while we have the funding? What is that going to look like in the future for us? So all these things are, as I'm listening to the other council members talk, all these things are kind of going through my mind in past conversations that we've had about long-term maintenance and care, providing opportunities across our entire community versus one portion of our community. You know, we talk about, you know, first responders, first responders aren't just, the police and fire. We also have public works. We have parks employees. There's a lot of different employees within the city. And so just understanding how they're impacted, I think is important. I feel I agree with Councilmember Thompson about wanting to have more information. I wish we had more information tonight, but at some point we have to rely on you guys to provide us the information as it comes in. And then we can mix the sausage up, and we often, as elected leaders, we hear this sausage making process and a link comes out the other end. That's kind of what I'm kind of looking for us to have, is the opportunity to talk through all these different variables and ensure we're making the best decisions possible long-term for our community, not just short-term. It's easy to go spend $13 million on a couple little items, but are they going to have the biggest impact? And yes, we want to look at it through a DEI lens, but at the same time, we also want to look at it as how is it overall going to affect our entire community? During your presentation, I took several notes, and I don't want to really key on all of them, but you'd kind of gone through some slides that had some dollars on them, and I think it was roughly around $3 million or something like that, with a couple ongoing items. Is that a representation of the ARPA funding that we would be spending in this first round, or is that just a snapshot of it?
Yes. So all of the proposals that I showed you, that would be just for this first round. And just to give you an idea of what we were asking for, as we had mentioned, we have already received approximately $6.6 million in ARPA funds. All of the requests that were in the presentation tonight is just shy of $3 million. So we still have easily $3.6 million worth of funding in this first tranche that has not been proposed or assigned, or proposed for council to assign.
Yeah, and that's kind of where as I was taking my notes, I kind of noticed that $3 million mark, and I just wanted to clarify that. So then in the next year's August funding cycle, it could be potentially the same, the one-time funding source, right? The 6.6 million, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
The same type of thing could apply in that next cycle. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you're asking on that one.
So we're identifying the one-time sources today, hypothetically. We're just talking about them. But if we identify these for this cycle, then in the next cycle, we could go through would we be going through the same process again to identify for that cycle? Or are we going to try to identify it for the entire 13 million now?
I would anticipate that this is going to be an ongoing conversation that we have with council and with the community, because I think it's unrealistic to assume that our community or our needs are going to stay static between now and even next August when we receive those monies. So now would be the time to really start those conversations and engage the community and engage council and staff and our community partners to determine where we need that money. So whatever we decide with this first bit of money is not like we're just done. It's going to be an ongoing conversation. And we really don't want to obligate that second amount of funding until we actually receive it, because, you never know until it's in the bank. I think it's best that we don't plan on it being there.
And Director Bothell, I want to thank you for clarifying the risk. I think that's a big piece for us to be thinking about, is if we risk funding something or potentially funding something that may not be part or be able to be allocated for, what is our risk there? We don't want to go down a road of trying to apply something and have it taken back from us. So I thank you for providing that input. I would also have a question on what other municipalities around our region are doing with their funding. I think it would be great to have a conversation to understand what other municipalities are doing with their funding as we have this conversation. In our Human Services Committee, we were just having a conversation around funding different nonprofit entities. And one of the things that we had talked about was, maybe somebody doesn't apply for something because they're getting funding from another resource. And so I want to make sure that we're kind of talking through what are other municipalities doing within their community, so that we, can kind of model some of those same things within our community. So we ensure that we are looking at it from all different lenses. And then, lastly, something that kind of weighs on me heavily is the opportunities that people have within our community. Some people have better opportunities than others within our community. And how do we as a council, as a city, look at individual pockets of our community through a DEI lens and say, this group here deserves to have funding over this group over here. And I think as we go through this process, that needs to be a pretty robust conversation to ensure that we aren't being exclusive rather than being inclusive. So that really, after having our conversations here recently on the DEI and trying to move things forward, I think we really need to pay close attention to that, because I would hate to get into a situation where we're all focused on these good things over here, but they have an adverse effect on other pockets of our community. So I wanted to bring that up, that I think that would be great if we could have that conversation at the same time.
Lots of great conversation on this topic here so far. So I think some of the themes that I've heard that I agree with, and I wanted to reiterate, emphasize, was focusing on one-time expenses, increasing ongoing expenses. I think that's something to strive to avoid with the ARPA funds. I do like the early wins, having items that we have 100% confidence in that we can, that will apply and will stand the rigor of audits on this, spending those and getting those moving and getting those engaged. Because there are, each set of funds needs to be obligated or incurred by the certain dates. So getting them in motion and spending them is, you shouldn't spend it just to spend it, but when they're known projects and needs in the community, I think moving in that path is, in a timely manner, is very good. And I think, as Councilmember McNeil said, this was just the first portion of it. And then in early 2022, we're looking at engaging with the community and doing a process that I think will be able to roll into an ongoing effort to look at the balance of this first portion of the ARPA funds, and then continuing that and engaging the community, the initial group of the community, and reaching out to additional people within the community to further that reach and look at the second half of the money. So I appreciate that was already in the schedule, and staff is doing a great job at investigating what can and can't be used. I know with earlier funds that we received, there was a lot of gray area, a lot of stipulations that it took a while to understand. And I think a lot of the council members have stated, we don't want to spend something and have it clawed back and then just be spending our general funds on something that we thought we were going to get paid with these funds. So a few people have talked about the human services. I think focusing on enhancing those that have been impacted by COVID impacts. I think those are some of the human services that we should look at for the ARPA funds. As Councilmember Dewar was saying, keeping these as one-time events, so focusing on the services that had above and beyond impacts from COVID, I think is the right wrinkle to looking at the ARPA funds. And I will stop right there.
Well, thank you all for your feedback and your candor. We really appreciate it. We're going to take what we learned tonight and probably obviously make some adjustments to the process and to the package. Maybe think about an off ramp or a special touch that we can have with this on the October 12th budget meeting or something like that. But I really appreciate your feedback and your candor, and we will make some adjustments. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to our council conversations. Pretty sure Deputy Mayor Zorns does not want to go first this time, so. So anyone else?
I just realized I was off mute. I was laughing. I'm so sorry, Councilmember Zorns. I had to, because you do always go first in council conversations.
I have one comment. As long as y'all let me come up with there's another thing that I wanted to talk about. I have a hero that I was reminded of and had completely forgotten about and feel terrible, but every library user would know of and remember Betty Green and her contributions to Friends of the Bothell Library. And she was just reminding me she spent over 50 years volunteering in the Bothell Library, all those book sales, trying to recruit people to help and participate to raise money for our library. She worked in our Bothell Library back when it was in the old City Hall, before it moved to the Dawson Building, before it moved to its present location. So I just want to give a shout out to Betty Green. She's a great community member who is probably an unsung hero in making our library really shine. And I know I've taken advantage of her labors many, many times. So shout out to Betty.
And there's Deputy Mayor Zorn's way of getting Bothell's bests plugged into there. Just going right at it. So that's awesome.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Well done.
Pick me. I remember what it was because you were there too at the audit that we had last week.
Oh, yes.
Stellar. We didn't get to brag at the start of it. And I wanted to just share, you did a fabulous job thanking staff for all of the work they did. But I wrote down a couple of quotes that I wanted to share, and then I'll let you chime in. Was the auditor said it was all good news that day. It was a clean audit. It was clean everywhere, and that Maureen and Chris and the staff just did a stellar job. We met all our expectations on our federal grant compliance audit. We just did see how that's under. The city did, and our finance department did an incredible job keeping our noses clean. So shout out to them for their hard work.
Yeah, it was definitely a glowing review, and they definitely enjoyed working with Bothell staff, and it came in under the estimated budget for the audit as well. So yeah, great job. And we saw Director Bothwell many times. So here he is, just working away.
Did everyone enjoy the last day of summer? Go into mourning?
It'll come back.
Councilmember McNeil is like, yeah, I got to roll the window down.
It was a little wet the last couple of days for us, so. Summer's already over. Thinking about next summer. Prepping for next summer.
Look how green Wayne is already.
I mean, isn't it beautiful back there? It
Yep.
just looks gorgeous.
Councilmember Dewar.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
All right, everyone got lots of talking time tonight. Everyone, it's all talked out. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Another
Good
great
night.
meeting.
Night, everyone.
See you in October.
Night.
Good night.